Imagine a battlefield so utterly broken, so choked with barbed wire, craters, and the stench of death that mere survival was a miracle, an advance an impossibility. Imagine the machine gun, a technological marvel, transforming open fields into charnel houses, forcing millions into an agonizing, static stalemate. For millennia, the nature of warfare had remained fundamentally unchanged in its core principles. Armies clashed, cavalry charged, and infantry lines engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. While technology had provided incrementally better weapons, the longbow, the cannon, the rifle, the tactical stalemate on the battlefield often remained defined by defense's inherent advantage. By the dawn of the 20th century, that advantage had reached an unprecedented, horrifying peak. Commanders, clinging to 19th century tactics, ordered repeated massed infantry assaults across the open ground between the trenches. These attacks invariably resulted in horrific casualties, measured in the tens of thousands for mere yards of ground gained, often to be lost again in a counterattack. The Battle of the Somme in 1916, for instance, saw over 1 million casualties and gained little strategic advantage. The war became a grinding, attritional struggle, a horrific deadlock where millions of lives were squandered against an enemy that could simply dig deeper and fire faster. Both sides desperately sought a solution, a way to break the deadlock and restore mobility to the battlefield. They needed a vehicle that could traverse the broken terrain, cross trenches, crush barbed wire, and crucially, withstand the hail of machine gun fire that made advance impossible. They needed an answer to the machine gun. The rapid-fire machine gun, like the Vickers or the Maxim, could mow down hundreds of attacking soldiers in seconds, transforming open fields into killing zones. Improved artillery, capable of unleashing devastating barrages, churned the no-man's land into a cratered wasteland, but could not reliably break the enemy's deeply entrenched positions. The tank, once a crude, unreliable novelty, had proven its potential to break the stalemate of trench warfare. But its role in future conflicts was far from clear. On one hand, its ability to cross trenches, crush barbed wire, and withstand small arms fire was undeniable. On the other, its limited speed, mechanical unreliability, and the prevailing tendency to parcel out tanks in small numbers to support infantry, rather than concentrating them for massed breakthroughs, meant its full potential remained largely unrealized. Britain, the birthplace of the tank, initially saw it primarily as an infantry support weapon, a mobile pillbox to clear a path for foot soldiers. France, having produced the revolutionary Renault FT, focused on using tanks in a similar, largely defensive support role, often integrating them into fixed fortifications. Influenced by its experiences with the cumbersome Mark series, British doctrine largely bifurcated tank development into two distinct categories. Other nations, like Germany and the Soviet Union, were less constrained by WWI paradigms and began to think more radically about the tank's offensive potential. Its primary role was to break through fortified lines and support foot soldiers in close combat. Its role was to range ahead, engage enemy cavalry or light vehicles, and disrupt enemy rear areas, much like cavalry had done in previous eras. The cruiser MKI and Mk2 exemplified this design, prioritizing speed and maneuverability over heavy protection. While this two-class system seemed logical on paper, it often led to logistical complexities. In tanks that were either too slow or too lightly armored for the rapidly evolving battlefield of World War II. Examples like the Matilda I and Matilda II from the late 1930s embodied this philosophy. Being slow, but almost impervious to the standard anti-tank guns of the early war, the economic realities of the post-war world, particularly the Great Depression, also heavily influenced tank development. Resources were scarce, and military budgets often prioritized existing, proven forces over expensive experimental armored formations. The challenge was not just technological, but also doctrinal, political, and economic. The tank had shown what it could do, but not yet how it could revolutionize warfare. The next 2 decades, the interwar years, would become a crucial laboratory of military thought, a period of intense experimentation in tank design, and the tank's true strength lay not just in its armor and firepower, but in its ability to restore movement to the battlefield. However, for this mobility to be effective, tanks could not operate in isolation. They needed to be integrated into a combined arms team, working in close concert with specialized infantry, artillery, and increasingly air power. This realization shifted the focus from merely building better tanks to developing a coherent doctrine for their effective employment. Perhaps more importantly, the development of the doctrines that would either unleash or shackle its true power. Nations would draw vastly different conclusions from the recent conflict. These diverging paths would profoundly impact the opening stages of the next global war. Barbed wire strung in vast, dense belts funneled attackers into predetermined kill zones, making rapid advance impossible. 1.1. The problem. The stalemate of the Western Front. When the First World War erupted in August 1914, the initial expectation, based on generations of military thought, was a swift, decisive conflict. Cavalry would sweep around flanks, infantry would engage in glorious charges, and technology like the machine gun, though potent, would merely amplify the pace of battle. This section will cover the period between the two world wars, highlighting how various nations learned from WWI and began to develop the theories and designs that would shape tank warfare in the coming global conflict. Instead, within a few months, the Western Front devolved into an unimaginable nightmare of static trench warfare. From the North Sea to the Swiss border, opposing armies dug vast, intricate networks of trenches, barbed wire and machine gun nests, creating an impregnable defensive line. The reasons for this unprecedented stalemate were rooted in the lethal combination of new defensive technologies and outdated offensive doctrines. The result was a meat grinder. The rest of Part 1 remains as previously written. This revised opening aims to immediately pull the viewer into the dire situation that necessitated the Tank S invention, creating a sense of urgency and curiosity. Are you satisfied with this revised hook and ready to move on to Part 2? The interwar years, experimentation and doctrine? Sure. Let us dive into Part 2 of your script, the interwar years, experimentation and doctrine. Part 2, the interwar years, experimentation and doctrine. The guns of the Great War fell silent in November 1918, leaving behind a continent scarred by unprecedented destruction and military minds grappling with the lessons learned. 2.1. Lessons from WWI. The need for doctrine. The end of the First World War left military strategists with a complex legacy regarding the tank. The primary lesson gleaned by forward-thinking military theorists was the absolute necessity of mobility and coordination. Various nations began to grapple with this challenge. 2.2. British and French approaches. Caution and doctrine divergence. Great Britain, despite inventing the tank, found itself at a crossroads during the interwar period. First, the infantry tank was designed to be heavily armored but relatively slow, intended to operate at the pace of infantry, clearing obstacles and suppressing enemy strongpoints. Second, the cruiser tank was conceived as a faster, more mobile vehicle, lightly armored, but with good speed, designed to exploit breakthroughs made by the infantry tanks. France, a nation deeply scarred by the immense casualties of WWI and obsessed with preventing another devastating invasion, adopted an even more conservative approach. Their doctrine was heavily influenced by a defensive mindset, epitomized by the construction of the Maginot Line, an extensive chain of fixed fortifications, bunkers, and obstacles along their eastern border with Germany. French tank development largely mirrored this defensive strategy. Their tanks were generally well-armored, prioritizing protection over speed, and were often designed to be integrated into infantry divisions, operating as a mobile component of a defensive line rather than as an independent striking force. The Char B1 bis, a powerful and heavily armored tank for its time, was a testament to this philosophy. While early tanks like the Panzer I and Panzer II were light and armed only with machine guns or small cannons, they served as crucial training vehicles for the nascent panzer forces, allowing crews and commanders to master the tactics of mobile warfare. The Panzer III, designed to engage other tanks, and the Panzer IV, Intended for infantry support and anti-tank duties with a larger gun, formed the backbone of the panzer divisions. The Soviet Union, under Stalin, embarked on an ambitious program to industrialize rapidly. And a significant portion of that industrial capacity was dedicated to military production, particularly tanks. The BT series of tanks, with their convertible wheel-and-track drive, provided valuable experience in high-speed mechanized warfare. But it was the T-26, a light infantry tank produced in enormous numbers, and especially the KV series of heavy tanks that showcased Soviet industrial might. The KV-1, with its incredibly thick armor and powerful 76mm gun, was virtually impervious to any tank gun then in existence when it first appeared. They built more tanks than any other nation in the interwar period, and indeed, far more than Germany, France, and Britain combined. The T-34 combined an innovative sloped armor design, which effectively increased its protection against incoming shells, with a powerful 76mm gun, wide tracks for excellent cross-country mobility, and a potent diesel engine. It was a revolutionary blend of protection, firepower, and mobility years ahead of its time. Neither was individually superior to the best French or British tanks in terms of armor or firepower at the beginning of the war, but their strength lay in their tactical employment. Stalin's purges of the late 1930s decimated the senior officer corps, including many of the brilliant minds behind deep battle doctrine like Tukhachevsky, leaving the Red Army's armored units poorly led and inadequately trained. This will be the longest and most detailed section of your script, around 3,000 words, to cover the immense scope. Logistical support was often lacking, and maintenance was poor. We're now at roughly 3,200 words total. Thus, while the Soviets possessed the largest and, in some cases, most technologically advanced tank forces in the world by 1939, their effective operational use would prove to be a tragic struggle against internal disorganization and a ruthless enemy. This act, and the conflicts that immediately followed, would prove to be the ultimate test for the myriad tank designs and armored doctrines developed in secret and in the open. The tank, a clumsy and unreliable novelty in 1918, was about to be unleashed as the primary instrument of combined arms maneuver, fundamentally redefining warfare and ushering in its true golden age. From the flat plains of Poland to the scorching deserts of North Africa, and from the vast frozen steppes of the Eastern Front to the hedgerows of Normandy, tanks would dominate land warfare like never before, evolving at a staggering pace under the brutal demands of total war. The theoretical foundation was there, but the practical execution would require the crucible of total war to be forged into a truly formidable fighting force. The Germans focused on reliable radios for interting communication, allowing commanders to direct their formations in real time on the move, a crucial advantage over their adversaries. This revolutionary doctrine, combining mechanized forces, close air support, and superior communication, would be tested with devastating effect in the opening campaigns of World War II. Decades of theoretical work by visionaries like Heinz Guderian, combined with secret rearmament and intensive training, now bore terrifying fruit. The Polish army, though brave, was still largely reliant on cavalry and infantry, completely unprepared for the speed and coordination of the German attack. But its limited range and complex, multi-person crew requirements hindered its offensive potential. This reliance on fixed defenses and infantry support tanks meant that France, despite possessing some of the most formidable individual tank designs at the outset of World War II, influenced by theorists like Mikhail Tukhachevsky, the Soviets developed the concept of deep battle. This doctrine envisioned multi-layered, simultaneous assaults designed to shatter an enemy's entire defensive system in depth, rather than merely punching through a single line. Tanks were central to this vision, meant to lead massive, coordinated breakthroughs, followed by mechanized infantry and airborne troops to exploit the advances and paralyze the enemy's rear. Lacked the doctrine for their effective concentrated offensive use, strategic flaw that would prove fatal in 1940. 2.3. German innovation and blitzkrieg philosophy, the Lightning War. While Britain and France debated infantry versus cruiser tanks and built defensive lines, Germany, despite the Treaty of Versailles restrictions on rearmament, was secretly developing a radical new approach to armored warfare. Unburdened by the conservative doctrines of the victors and deeply influenced by proponents like Heinz Guderian, Germany embraced the concept of Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Guderian, a visionary who studied the limited tank actions of WWI and observed the Red Army's early experiments, argued passionately for the concentration of tanks into independent armored divisions, known as panzer divisions. These divisions would not merely support infantry. They would lead the attack, punching through enemy lines at high speed, bypassing strong points, and disrupting enemy command and control in the rear. Infantry, motorized or mechanized, would follow closely to secure the breakthroughs, supported by dive bombers providing close air support, acting as flying artillery. This doctrine emphasized speed, surprise, and overwhelming localized force. German tank development in the 1930s reflected this philosophy. 2.4. Soviet mass production in deep battle, the quantity approach. Across Eastern Europe, another military giant, the Soviet Union, was also independently developing highly advanced armored warfare doctrines during the interwar period. What distinguished the Soviet approach was its unparalleled emphasis on mass production. This focus on quantity led to the development of several highly influential designs. However, the pinnacle of Soviet tank design during this period, though its true impact would only be felt later, was the T-34, developed in secret. Despite these advanced designs and a forward-thinking doctrine, the Soviet tank forces faced severe setbacks. This completes Part 2, adding approximately 1,600 words. Next, we move into the defining era of tank warfare, World War II, where these interwar doctrines would be put to the ultimate test. Are you ready to proceed with Part 3? World War II? The tank's golden age? Yes, excellent. World War II truly was the golden age of the tank, where its potential was fully unleashed and doctrines refined in the crucible of conflict. Let's dive into Part 3. World War II. The tank's golden age. Part 3. World War II. The tank's golden age. The uneasy peace of the interwar years shattered on September 1, 1939, when Nazi Germany launched its invasion of Poland. 3.1. Blitzkrieg unleashed. Poland and France. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 served as the brutal debut of Germany's revolutionary Blitzkrieg doctrine. German panzer divisions, spearheaded by Panzer I, II, III, and IV tanks, sliced through Polish defenses like a hot knife through butter. The light Panzer I and II, armed mostly with machine guns or small cannons, were useful for suppressing infantry. Against a numerically superior Allied force, which possessed tanks that were individually often better armored and more powerfully armed than many panzers, Germany aimed for strategic surprise. France fell in a mere 6 weeks, a shocking defeat that demonstrated the decisive power of concentrated armor when combined with superior doctrine, training, and communications. The Blitzkrieg had not only shattered enemy armies but shattered outdated military paradigms, proving that the tank was now the true king of the land battlefield. This theater, characterized by flat, featureless deserts, was ideally suited for mobile armored warfare, providing few natural obstacles and rewarding long-range engagements. The desert environment presented unique challenges: extreme temperatures, abrasive sand that clogged engines, and vast distances that strained supply lines to their breaking point. Logistics, particularly fuel and spare parts, became as critical as direct combat prowess. The British received better tanks from the United States, most notably the M3 Lee Grant and, more importantly, the M4 Sherman. The Sherman, with its reliable mechanicals, decent armor, an effective 75mm gun, began to redress the qualitative imbalance. Rommel's forces, too, received upgraded Panzer IIs with longer 50mm guns and, critically, Panzer IVs with the more powerful long 75mm KWK-40 gun, which could defeat the Sherman's frontal armor at combat ranges. Here the legendary Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, would rise to prominence, showcasing his tactical genius with armored forces. General Bernard Montgomery's British Eighth Army was bolstered by a significant numerical advantage in tanks. Artillery and air support launched a sustained offensive. Firstly, they continually upgraded their existing Panzer IV, giving it a longer, more powerful 75mm KWK-40L-43 gun, significantly improving its anti-tank capabilities. This made the Panzer IV the true backbone of the Wehrmacht's armored forces throughout the war, as it was reliable and relatively easy to produce. Secondly, they developed entirely new Cat tanks to counter the T-34 and KV-1's advantages, leading to the legendary Tiger Eye and Panther tanks' Eastern Front, quantity versus quality, while Rommel still displayed tactical brilliance. His forces were critically short on fuel, supplies, and replacements. This front became the ultimate proving ground for tanks, witnessing tank battles on a scale never before imagined and driving the most rapid advancements in tank design of the entire war. The sheer weight of Allied numbers and their logistical superiority eventually overwhelmed the Afrika Korps. The North African campaign demonstrated that, while tactical genius like Rommel's could achieve remarkable feats, it could not overcome overwhelming numerical superiority and logistical strangulation in the long run. It also solidified the M for Sherman as a workhorse of the Western Allies, ready for its larger role in Europe. Allied commanders, particularly the French, believed the heavily forested Ardennes region was impassable for large armored formations. They concentrated their best forces to meet a German thrust through Belgium, expecting a repeat of WWI-style trench warfare. While the Matilda II was almost impervious to the early 37mm and short 50mm guns of the Panzer Is, its slow speed and limited gun traverse hampered its effectiveness, and the sheer unpreparedness and disorganization of the Red Army, severely weakened by Stalin's purges, German Panzer III and IV tanks, while mechanically sound and expertly employed, soon encountered a terrifying surprise: the Soviet T-34 medium tank and the KV-1 heavy tank. The T-34 was a revolutionary design, far superior to anything the Germans had in production. Sloped armor effectively deflected German anti-tank rounds. Its powerful 76.2mm gun could penetrate any German tank, and its wide tracks gave it exceptional mobility in the difficult Russian terrain, especially the infamous mud and snow. The KV-1, though slow and mechanically complex, was virtually impenetrable to all German anti-tank weapons until the introduction of new, more powerful guns. These wonder tanks initially caused panic and forced German designers back to the drawing board. British cruiser tanks were faster, but too lightly armored. Rommel, however, expertly used combined arms. He would often bait British tanks into attacking, then draw them onto the waiting guns of his powerful 88mm anti-aircraft guns, repurposed as devastating anti-tank weapons. These 88s could penetrate any Allied tank from long ranges, creating killing fields that decimated British armor. But the backbone was the Panzer III, designed for tank-to-tank combat, and the Panzer IV. With its larger gun for infantry support and anti-fortification roles, their speed was phenomenal. Tanks, followed by motorized infantry and engineers, covered vast distances in days, bypassing the flanks of the Maginot Line, which became a strategic irrelevance. Critically, the German tanks were equipped with far more radios than their Allied counterparts. This superior communication allowed German commanders to maintain situational awareness, adapt to changing conditions, and coordinate their rapidly moving units with unprecedented efficiency. French tank units, often operating as independent infantry support assets with poor internet communication, could not concentrate effectively or respond to the lightning-fast German thrusts. Even when individual French tanks proved superior in local engagements, their tactical successes were isolated and quickly overwhelmed by the sheer pace and scale of the German advance. What truly made them devastating was not their individual superiority. Polish tanks like the 7TP were often comparable or even better than early panzers, but their employment. The tanks did not stop to reduce every strong point. Instead, they bypassed them, driving deep into the rear, disrupting command, communications, and supply lines. The Luftwaffe provided crucial close air support, with Stuka dive bombers acting as flying artillery, further terrorizing and disorganizing the defenders. Polish forces, unable to react to the unprecedented speed of the advance, were rapidly encircled and destroyed. The campaign lasted just over a month, a grim demonstration of what mobile warfare could achieve. The lessons from Poland were quickly applied and perfected in the invasion of France in the Low Countries in May 1940. Here, the German gamble was even more audacious. Instead, Guderian's panzer divisions, numbering 7 in total, spearheaded the main German attack directly through the Ardennes, achieving complete tactical surprise. The dash to the sea cut off the British Expeditionary Force and the best French armies, leading to the Dunkirk evacuation. 3.2 North Africa, Desert Fox, and tank dueling, following the fall of France. The focus of tank warfare shifted dramatically to the vast open expanses of North Africa. From early 1941, Rommel's Afrika Korps, initially comprising primarily Panzer III and IV tanks, began a series of dramatic offensives and counter-offensives against British and Commonwealth forces. Early in the campaign, British tanks like the Cruiser series and the heavily armored Matilda II faced off against Rommel's panzers. As the campaign progressed, tank technology evolved rapidly. The turning point in North Africa came at the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942. Here, 3.3, the largest, most brutal, and arguably most decisive theater of World War II, was the Eastern Front, where Germany's Operation Barbarossa plunged them into a titanic struggle against the Soviet Union, starting in June 1941. Initially, the German invasion achieved stunning successes. Largely due to the tactical superiority of their Blitzkrieg doctrine, Germany's response to the T-34 was twofold. The Tiger I, introduced in late 1942, was a fearsome beast. With extremely thick vertical armor and the terrifyingly powerful 88mm KWK-36L 56 gun, could destroy virtually any Allied tank at long ranges, while being almost impervious to return fire from the front. Its psychological impact was immense. However, the Tiger was slow, mechanically complex, extremely fuel-thirsty, and very expensive and time-consuming to produce, meaning relatively few could be fielded. The Panther entering service in 1943 was Germany's direct answer to the T-34. It combined the T-34's sloped armor concept with a superior long 75mm KWK-42L70 gun. Excellent mobility and good protection. Many consider it one of the best tanks of World War II, a near-perfect balance of firepower, protection, and mobility. However, early Panthers suffered from significant mechanical reliability issues, particularly with their transmissions, and, like the Tiger, they were complex and expensive to manufacture, again limiting their numbers. The Eastern Front became a brutal war of attrition, with tank battles of unprecedented scale, such as the Battle of Kursk in July 1943. This was the largest tank battle in history, involving thousands of tanks from both sides. While German Tigers and Panthers inflicted heavy losses, the sheer numerical superiority of Soviet tanks, particularly the T-34, combined with devastating anti-tank artillery, mines, and air support, ultimately prevailed. The Soviets, despite huge losses, could replace their tanks far faster than the Germans, thanks to their massive and highly efficient wartime production. The balance had shifted, and from Kursk onwards, the German panzer forces were largely on the defensive. The Eastern Front demonstrated that while qualitative superiority was important, the ability to produce and deploy tanks in overwhelming numbers, alongside effective combined arms tactics, was ultimately decisive. When DID launched on June 6, 1944, American and British forces landed with their primary medium tank, the M4 Sherman 3.4. Western Front, Sherman versus German heavy armor. As the war progressed, the Western Allies prepared for the monumental task of liberating Western Europe. The typical M4 Sherman was armed with a 75mm or later, a 76mm gun. Its armor was adequate against most anti-tank threats encountered in North Africa and Italy, but was often outmatched by the long 75mm guns of the German Panther and the dreaded 88mm guns of the Tiger. In a head-to-head duel on open ground, particularly at longer ranges, a Sherman often stood little chance against a Panther or Tiger. This led to the perception, often exaggerated in popular culture, that the Sherman was a death trap, or inherently inferior. However, this perception overlooks several crucial realities. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and replacement tanks flowed continuously from the vast American industrial base, ensuring that units remained combat-ready. While Shermans might struggle against a Tiger in a tank duel, they rarely fought alone. Infantry, artillery, overwhelming air support worked in concert to neutralize threats. While German heavy tanks proved formidable defensive weapons, their limited numbers, mechanical issues, and the overwhelming Allied superiority in logistics, air power, and overall combined arms coordination ultimately sealed their fate. These often overlooked factors were absolutely critical to a tank force's effectiveness and often played a more decisive role in victory than the raw statistics of armor thickness or gun caliber. Moving thousands of tons of supplies from factories to the front lines required a vast network of railways, trucks, and specialized transport vehicles. Battlefield recovery teams worked tirelessly, often under fire, to retrieve damaged tanks, which would then be whisked away to mobile repair shops or even back to factories for complete overhauls. Well-trained crews understood their vehicles' capabilities and limitations, could operate effectively under pressure, communicate efficiently, and execute complex maneuvers. German panzer crews, having been at war for longer and often undergoing rigorous training, were initially highly skilled. Their emphasis on interpreting communication via radios gave them a critical advantage in the early war. The Soviets, despite their massive tank numbers, initially suffered from a severe lack of experienced crews and commanders due to the pre-war purges and the sheer speed of their wartime expansion. However, as the war progressed, the Red Army rapidly improved its training, gaining invaluable combat experience. The Western Allies also developed extensive training programs, from gunnery schools to combined arms exercises, ensuring that their crews were prepared for the realities of modern tank warfare. The morale and cohesion of a tank crew, forged through shared danger and intensive training, often made the difference between victory and defeat, turning a simple armored vehicle into a formidable fighting machine. By the end of World War II, the tank had cemented its place as the undisputed queen of the land battlefield, its future inextricably linked to these vital, interconnected systems. The reliability of Allied tanks, particularly the Sherman, made this process much smoother. German tanks, especially the more complex Tiger and Panther, were maintenance-intensive. A broken transmission on a Panther could often require special recovery vehicles, sometimes 2 or 3 of them, and take days or weeks to repair. This meant that while Germany might have had X number of tanks, a significant percentage were often out of action, awaiting repair or parts, dramatically reducing their effective combat strength. The Allies, particularly the United States, possessed an unparalleled industrial capacity and logistical infrastructure that allowed them to project power globally. American factories churned out tanks, trucks, and supplies at an astonishing rate, ensuring that a knocked-out Sherman could be replaced in a unit kept supplied far more easily than a German Tiger. Germany, by contrast, especially on the Eastern Front, often struggled with long, vulnerable supply lines, relying heavily on horse-drawn transport, even late into the war, a stark contrast to the fully mechanized Allied armies. The Western Front reaffirmed that while individual tank quality mattered, it was the robust, reliable, and mass-producible tank, supported by a superior logistical network and integrated into a comprehensive combined arms doctrine, that ultimately won the war. A single Tiger might knock out several Shermans, but it would inevitably be targeted by artillery, blasted by aircraft, or flanked by numerous other tanks. German forces, constantly harassed by Allied air superiority and struggling with dwindling resources, faced chronic shortages. The British developed the Sherman Firefly, mounting the powerful 17-pounder anti-tank gun, which could reliably penetrate Tiger and Panther frontal armor. American M4 South were later upgraded with the 76mm high-velocity gun. And later still, some were equipped with the more powerful 90mm gun and improved armor, although these were less numerous. 1. Numbers. For every Tiger or Panther, the Allies could field dozens of Shermans. The sheer numerical superiority often allowed Allied forces to overwhelm German heavy tanks through flanking maneuvers or by simply absorbing losses and continuing the advance. 2. Reliability and maintenance. The Sherman was mechanically highly reliable and relatively easy to maintain, repair, and recover from the battlefield. German heavy tanks, by contrast, were prone to breakdowns and required immense logistical effort to keep running. For every German heavy tank in combat, several more were often in repair depots. 3. Logistics. The Allies had overwhelming logistical superiority. 4. Combined arms. Allied doctrine, especially American, emphasized combined arms tactics. 5. Variants and upgrades. The Sherman platform was incredibly adaptable. The brutal fighting in Normandy's hedgerows, the breakout from the Falaise pocket, and the desperate German Ardennes offensive all saw intense tank combat. 3.5. Logistics, maintenance, and crew training. The unsung heroes. Beyond the dramatic clashes of armor on the battlefield, the true unsung heroes of tank warfare in World War II were the vast, complex systems of logistics, maintenance, and crew training. Logistics was the lifeblood of any armored force. Tanks consume immense quantities of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. Maintenance and recovery were equally vital. A tank, no matter how powerful, is useless if it's broken down or stuck. Finally, crew training was paramount. A tank is only as good as the men inside it. Part 4. The Cold War. Nuclear threat and Maine. Battle tanks. The mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended World War II, but they simultaneously heralded the dawn of a new, terrifying era, the Cold War. This prolonged geopolitical standoff between the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the Communist East, led by the Soviet Union, fundamentally reshaped military strategy and, by extension, tank design. The tank, having proved its decisive power on World War II battlefields, now faced a bewildering new paradigm, the threat of nuclear annihilation, which paradoxically both diminished and amplified its importance. The era of the specialized tank, infantry tanks, cruiser tanks, this led to increased focus on nuclear, biological, and chemical protection systems, including sealed crew compartments and air filtration systems. The emphasis shifted from sheer armored bulk, as seen in some late-war heavy tanks, to a balance of protection, firepower, and mobility that allowed tanks to disperse, move quickly, and deliver a powerful punch without presenting an easy target for a tactical nuclear strike. The ideal tank for the Cold War would be a highly versatile mobile platform capable of operating independently or as part of a rapidly moving combined arms force. It's ready to respond to threats across the vast plains of Central Europe, where the decisive conventional battle between NATO and the Warsaw Pact was expected to occur. Heavy tanks began to fade, giving way to a new, versatile breed, the Main Battle Tank, or MBT 4.1. Post-World War II paradigms. The nuclear shadow. This term, which came into widespread use during the Cold War, signified a profound shift from the specialized roles of World War II tanks. No longer would armies field separate heavy tanks, medium tanks, and light tanks for distinct tasks. Millions of square miles were dedicated to the theoretical tank battles of the Fulda Gap and other key strategic corridors. The design of these tanks would reflect the differing philosophies and industrial capacities of the two Cold War blocs, leading to a fascinating divergence in armored development. Their doctrine, evolving from deep battle, focused on overwhelming numerical superiority, rapid exploitation of breakthroughs, and the ability to fight effectively in a nuclear battlefield environment. They were compact, relatively simple to operate and maintain, and armed with a powerful 100mm main gun. This smoothbore technology provided higher muzzle velocity and greater penetration against Western armor. This tank featured significant improvements in protection with its composite armor, a more powerful 125mm smoothbore main gun, with an autoloader reducing crew to 3, but also leading to potential vulnerabilities if the autoloader was hit, and enhanced mobility. Lacking the manpower and industrial capacity to match Soviet production numbers, they focused on qualitative superiority, producing more technologically advanced, better protected, and more precise tanks, relying on individual tank performance and crew training to counter the numerical disadvantage. This led to a diverse range of sophisticated MBTs, each reflecting its nation's specific design priorities. The T-72 was designed to be a highly effective, yet still relatively cost-effective platform that could be produced in immense numbers. Armed with the excellent British 105mm L7 gun, the Leopard 1 emphasized mobility. This tank epitomized the British focus on crew protection and firepower, mounting an even larger and more powerful 120mm rifled gun and having exceptional frontal armor for its time, though, at the cost of mobility. It was essentially an evolution of the M48, but with a more powerful engine, a new cast turret, and the formidable 105mm M68 gun. The M60 series would remain the primary American MBT for over 2 decades, undergoing numerous upgrades and serving as a crucial component of NATO's armored strength and low weight over heavy armor, reflecting a doctrine of shoot and scoot and relying on agility for survival. It pioneered the concept of combined firepower and heavy armor, becoming a true proto-MBT. Its ruggedness and upgradability made it a benchmark, giving the Warsaw Pact a numerical advantage that deeply concerned NATO planners throughout the Cold War. A 90mm gun, and was widely exported, saw extensive combat in Vietnam and with various allied nations, while often criticized in the West for its lack of crew comfort and advanced electronics compared to Western counterparts. The T-72 represented the Soviet commitment to a doctrine of rapid, high-volume armored thrusts. While it retained many characteristics of its predecessor, it also introduced more advanced fire control systems and improved armor. Their low profile made them difficult to hit, and their ruggedness suited them for diverse terrain. The T-54 55ths became the quintessential Soviet tank, seeing action in virtually every major conflict of the Cold War and beyond, from the Arab-Israeli wars to Vietnam and Afghanistan. Its sheer ubiquity underscored the Soviet emphasis on quantity and reliability. This led to a series of iconic main battle tanks that would equip not only the Soviet Army, but also their Warsaw Pact allies and numerous client states around the globe. Instead, the MBT was designed to do it all, to engage enemy armor, support infantry, exploit breakthroughs, and provide overwhelming mobile firepower. It represented a synthesis of the best characteristics of its predecessors. The immediate aftermath of World War II saw armies around the world absorbing the staggering lessons of total mechanized warfare. However, the development of atomic weapons introduced an existential question. What role could conventional forces, including tanks, play in a conflict that might be decided by a single devastating strike? While nuclear weapons certainly introduced a terrifying new dimension, they also proved to be a weapon of last resort, too destructive to be used lightly. The risk of mutual assured destruction meant that conventional forces would still be essential for controlling territory, deterring limited aggression, and fighting non-nuclear conflicts. Indeed, the very existence of nuclear weapons made robust, mobile conventional forces even more critical, as they would be needed to operate on a potentially contaminated battlefield, to exploit breakthroughs after tactical nuclear strikes, or to simply hold ground against an enemy who might be willing to use smaller battlefield nuclear devices. In Panther, tanks as their primary battle vehicles. While the Soviets had relied heavily on the versatile T-34, the British Centurion, developed late in World War II and seeing extensive service post-war, is often cited as one of the first true MBTs, demonstrating the viability of a multi-role tank that could stand up to heavy German armor, but also operate effectively with infantry. Initially, some strategists believed that tanks, like all conventional forces, were rendered obsolete by the atom bomb. Why mass tanks for a ground offensive if a single nuclear warhead could vaporize an entire armored division? This perspective, however, quickly evolved. The nuclear threat also influenced tank design directly. Future tanks needed to be able to operate in an environment possibly contaminated by radiation or chemical agents. 4.2. Main battle tank concept emerges. The conceptual answer to the post-war challenges was the main battle tank. The MBT needed sufficient firepower to defeat any contemporary enemy tank, adequate armor protection to withstand enemy anti-tank weapons, high mobility to keep pace with motorized infantry and exploit opportunities, mechanical reliability for sustained operations. This integration was a direct lesson from World War II. The Germans had effectively used their medium panzer, for the MBT became the cornerstone of armored forces for both NATO and the Warsaw Pact. designed primarily for a potential large-scale conventional war in Europe. 4.3. Soviet dominance in numbers. T-54 55ths, T-62, T-72. The Soviet Union. Having emerged from World War II with the largest and arguably most experienced tank force, continued its emphasis on mass production and simple, robust designs. The T-54 and its slightly modernized variant, the T-55, introduced in the late 1940s, became the most produced tank in history, with over 100,000 units built. Building on the T-54 55 chassis, the T-62 represented an upgrade in firepower, mounting the first smoothbore tank gun, a 115mm weapon. The pinnacle of Soviet Cold War MBT design for mass production was the T-72. Entering service in the early 1970s, 4.4 Western counterparts, quality and technological edge. In response to the sheer numbers of Soviet tanks, Western nations, particularly the United States, Britain, and Germany, adopted a different philosophy. The British Centurion tank, entering service just after World War II, proved remarkably adaptable and long-lived, serving with numerous armies well into the late 20th century. The United States developed a series of MBTs, beginning with the M48 patent in the 1950s, a direct successor to the M47. It featured a rounded cast hull. Germany, rearming in the 1950s. Focused on mobility and firepower, leading to the Leopard 1 in the early 1960s, the British continued their MBT development with the Chieftain in the 1960s. Finally, the most numerous American Cold War MBT was the M60 patent, entering service in 1960. These Western MBTs generally featured more sophisticated fire control systems, better crew comfort, and more advanced engines and transmissions compared to their Soviet counterparts. While debates about which tank was better raged for decades, the reality was a delicate balance. The West sought to achieve qualitative superiority that could overcome the Soviet quantitative advantage, a strategic arms race that defined armored development throughout the Cold War. Improving one often came at the expense of another, forcing difficult design compromises. The Cold War saw these elements pushed to their limits by both East and West. 4.5. Tank design philosophies. The triad evolves, particularly shaped charges that could defeat traditional steel armor, but features like blowout panels for ammunition storage and battlefield management. The tank was no longer just a weapon. It was a complex, integrated fighting system, reflecting decades of lessons learned in the ever-present shadow of a potential global conflict. Reactive armor, which detonated outwards to disrupt incoming projectiles, also appeared in later Cold War designs. NBC protection became standard. Improvements in suspension systems allowed for better off-road performance and crew comfort, reducing fatigue. The development of automatic transmissions streamlined driving, allowing crews to focus more on combat tasks, and confirming the MBT's versatility, even in environments not ideally suited for them. The stage was now set for the next generation of MBTs, which would fully embrace cutting-edge technology and be put to the test in the deserts of the Middle East. Redefining modern armored warfare once again, initially North Korean T-34E5s overwhelmed lightly armed American and South Korean forces. However, the arrival of American M26 Pershing and later M46 Patton tanks, which were superior to the T-3485 in armor and firepower, quickly turned the tide in tank-and-tank engagements. While the later stages of the war devolved into static trench warfare, the tanks proved invaluable for infantry support, direct fire against fortifications, and limited mobile operations. While heavy tanks were largely discarded, even the heaviest MBTs were designed to achieve impressive cross-country speeds. The threat of a massive armored clash on the plains of Central Europe diminished, but new, asymmetric conflicts and regional flashpoints emerged. This new era would test the third generation of main battle tanks, pushing their technological capabilities to their limits and forcing adaptations to their traditional roles. An M1 Abrams, capable of firing highly effective APFs, DS, and heat rounds at extreme velocities. The Soviets continued with their 125mm smoothbore guns, often featuring autoloaders. The British Challenger 2 notably retained a 120mm rifled gun, allowing it to fire the unique Hesh round, effective against fortifications and even damaging tanks by spalling armor from the inside. This third generation of MBTs represented a pinnacle of conventional armored warfare, combining unprecedented levels of protection, devastating firepower, and impressive mobility. Sophisticated ballistic computers, laser rangefinders, thermal imaging sights, and advanced gun stabilization systems allowed these tanks to acquire targets and fire accurately while on the move, day or night and in adverse weather conditions. The ability to shoot on the move and operate effectively 24/7 provided a massive tactical advantage. Key examples include the American M1 Abrams, the German Leopard 2, the British Challenger 2, and the Russian T-80 and T-90, or advanced diesel engines, providing excellent power-to-weight ratios for rapid acceleration and high top speeds, crucial for offensive maneuvers and tactical redeployments. From the lightning-fast armored charges of Desert Storm to the grinding urban combat of Iraq and Afghanistan, tanks would continue to prove their enduring if evolving relevance. And more an infantry conflict fought in dense jungle and rice paddies, often limiting the effective deployment of heavy armor. This provided exceptional protection against both kinetic energy penetrators and shape-charge warheads, significantly enhancing survivability. Depleted uranium inserts, particularly in later M1 Abrams variants, further boosted protection. American M48 Pattons and later M551 Sheridans were used, primarily in an infantry support role, providing fire suppression against Viet Cong and NVA positions. North Vietnamese forces eventually deployed T-5455s and even some T-59s. Notably during the Easter Offensive in 1972, while there were some tank-and-tank engagements, the environment often favored infantry with anti-tank weapons or air support. Vietnam highlighted the challenges of deploying heavy armor in unconventional terrain and conflicts, forcing adaptations in doctrine and usage. Throughout the Cold War, tank designers grappled with the fundamental triad of tank characteristics: protection, firepower, and mobility. Protection evolved significantly. Beyond steel, composite armors began to emerge, combining layers of different materials to defeat new types of anti-tank munitions. Firepower saw a dramatic increase. The move from 90mm to 100mm, then to 105mm, and finally to 120mm and 125mm, guns reflected the constant need to defeat ever thicker enemy armor. The development of new ammunition types, such as armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot rounds, significantly improved penetration capabilities. Fire control systems became increasingly sophisticated, incorporating laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, and thermal sights, allowing tanks to engage targets accurately at night and at longer ranges. The ability to fire anti-tank guided missiles from the main gun, particularly in Soviet designs, added another dimension to long-range engagement. Mobility was also crucial. Powerful diesel engines became standard, offering better fuel efficiency and range. Beyond these three core elements, the Cold War also saw a greater emphasis on survivability, not just protection. 4.6. Early Cold War conflicts, Korea and Vietnam. While the primary strategic focus for MBTs remained a potential clash in Europe, tanks did see action in proxy conflicts around the globe, albeit sometimes in limited or unexpected roles. The Korean War provided the first major testing ground for Cold War-era tanks. The Vietnam War, by contrast, was less a tank war. These conflicts, though not defining the mainstream Cold War tank development, provided crucial real-world lessons, influencing design refinements. Part 5. Modern Battlegrounds. Desert Storm 2. Urban Warfare. As the Cold War drew to a close in the late 1980s, the global geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically. 5.1. Third-generation MBTs, digitalization, composites. A PS, the late Cold War and post-Cold War era witnessed the maturation of the main battle tank into highly sophisticated, digitally integrated fighting machines. The advancements in these tanks were revolutionary. Advanced composite armor. moving beyond traditional steel and even early composite arrangements. These tanks incorporated highly classified, multi-layered Chobham type or Dorchester armor that combined steel, ceramics, and other exotic materials. Powerful smoothbore guns. The Western standard became the 120mm smoothbore gun, like the Rheinmetall RH-120 on Leopard 2 digital fire control systems. This was a game-changer. High-powered engines. Most third-generation MBTs were powered by powerful gas turbine, active protection systems, while still relatively nascent in the early third generation. The concept of a PS began to gain traction. These systems were designed to detect incoming anti-tank missiles or rockets and either jam them or physically intercept them before impact. Adding another layer of defense beyond passive armor, these tanks were designed for speed, precision, and overwhelming firepower, ready to dominate any conventional battlefield scenario. 5.2 Gulf War, the M1 Abrams moment. This conflict was a textbook demonstration of mechanized maneuver warfare in open desert terrain, a scenario for which the M1 Abrams and other coalition MBTs were explicitly designed. The Iraqi army, though numerically large, was equipped primarily with older Soviet-era tanks like the T-55 T-62 and export model T-72S, which lacked the sophisticated fire control thermal sights and advanced armor of their Western counterparts. Later conflicts, solidifying its reputation as a highly effective and reliable platform. It was a triumphant validation of the qualitative advantage strategy pursued by NATO. Throughout the Cold War, the Challenger 1 South also performed exceptionally, with one famously achieving the longest tank-in-tank kill in history at over 5,100 meters. The first true test for this new generation of MBTs came during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. And Afghanistan presented a different, far more challenging environment: dense urban areas and asymmetric counterinsurgency operations. These environments exposed vulnerabilities in even the most advanced MBTs and forced a reevaluation of their role. Its thermal sights proved decisive, allowing American and British Challenger 1 crews to see and engage Iraqi tanks at ranges of 2,500 meters or more. Even through the smoke and dust of battle, and crucially at night, the tank's limited gun elevation, depression can make it difficult to engage targets on upper floors or in basements. Iraqi tanks, often lacking these capabilities, were frequently engaged before they could even detect their adversaries. These included this first shot, first kill advantage resulted in devastatingly lopsided engagements. The performance of the M1A1 Abrams was nothing short of legendary. In rear armor to threats like rocket-propelled grenades, DUP, explosively formed penetrators, and improvised explosive devices. This necessitated significant upgrades to underbody armor and mine protection. RPGs, easily concealed and fired from short range, proved particularly dangerous, especially to side and rear armor. Their psychological impact on insurgents and their ability to absorb punishment made them a critical asset, even if their operational methods had to adapt.
Ow.
These conflicts demonstrated that while the tank's core principles remained, its employment and design needed continuous refinement to meet the evolving threats of the 21st century battlefield. The future battlefield is envisioned as a highly connected, data-rich environment, where traditional manned platforms will increasingly operate alongside unmanned systems. The tank of tomorrow will likely be a hybrid of advanced armor, enhanced sensors, and autonomous capabilities. Future designs aim for significant weight reduction through advanced materials, while hybrid electric drivetrains promise better fuel efficiency, stealth, and exportable power. Projects like the Abrams SEX Technology Demonstrator explore these concepts. In iconic battles like 73 Easting, U.S. armored cavalry units, spearheading the left hook maneuver, obliterated entire Iraqi armored formations with minimal losses. Future MBTs will likely serve as command and control nodes for networked swarms of unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned ground vehicles. Drones can provide enhanced reconnaissance, extend the tank's sensor reach, act as decoys, or even deliver precision strikes, keeping the manned tank out of direct harm's way. Anti-drone capabilities, including specialized ammunition or integrated weapon systems, are becoming a necessity. Robotic combat vehicles could lead assaults, drawing fire, or carrying out dangerous tasks like mine clearance. It began as a crude tool to break trench lines and matured into the main battle tank, a sophisticated, multi-ton symphony of steel, technology, and human ingenuity, where hard-kill, incoming threats is becoming paramount against ubiquitous anti-tank guided missiles and the emerging threat of armed drones. Its future lies not in its obsolescence but in its continued transformation, embracing robotics, artificial intelligence, and networked operations. The evolution of the tank is a testament to human ingenuity in the face of conflict, a powerful symbol of adapting technology to overcome the brutal realities of war. As long as armies need to seize and hold ground, as long as there's a need for protected mobile firepower, the roar of the tank engine, in some form, will echo across the battlegrounds of tomorrow. Its journey from a WWI monster to a modern marvel is far from over. It provides unparalleled shock action, the ability to rapidly project overwhelming firepower, and the crucial psychological effect of its presence on the battlefield. It offers protection to its crew in a way no other land vehicle can, allowing soldiers to close with and destroy the enemy. Automation, like advanced autoloaders, may reduce crew size, freeing up personnel for other tasks or allowing for more compact designs. These systems are integrating AI for faster detection and response. The future of the tank. Drones, AI, robotics, next-gen designs. Abrams tanks were hit by Iraqi fire, but their advanced composite armor proved virtually impenetrable to the 125mm guns of the Iraqi T-72s, particularly from the front. The few Abrams tanks that were lost were primarily due to friendly fire, mechanical breakdown, or being intentionally destroyed by their crews to prevent capture after getting stuck in the mud or sand. No Abrams was confirmed destroyed by Iraqi tank fire. The Leopard 2 of the German army, though not deployed to the Gulf, proved its capabilities in numerous exercises. The Gulf War solidified the perception that Western third-generation MBTs were vastly superior to their Soviet-designed counterparts in a conventional, open-field conflict, primarily due to their technological edge in targeting, night fighting, and protection. 5.3. Urban Warfare Challenges. Lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan. While the Gulf War showcased the tank's prowess in open maneuver, the subsequent conflicts in Iraq and urban combat, the traditional advantages of a tank, long-range firepower, high speed, and heavy frontal armor, are often mitigated. Limited visibility, buildings, narrow streets, and debris restrict visibility, creating ambushes from unexpected angles, threat from all directions. Unlike open combat, where threats are primarily frontal, urban environments expose a tank's weaker side, top IEDs and mines. Insurgents extensively used IEDs, ranging from small charges to massive bombs, capable of disabling or even destroying heavy MBTs. Friendly fire and identification. The close quarters and chaotic nature of urban combat increased the risk of friendly fire incidents and made target identification difficult. Logistical strain. Operating in urban areas is often more fuel-intensive and mechanically demanding, increasing the strain on maintenance and logistics. In response, tanks like the M1 Abrams and Challenger 2 underwent significant upgrades, often referred to as urban warfare kits, or TUSK. Explosive, reactive armor blocks added to the sides, rear, and sometimes roof to defeat shape-charge warheads. Slat armor fitted around the rear and sides is designed to prematurely detonate RPGs before they hit the main armor. Remote weapon stations, allowing the crew to operate machine guns from inside the protection of the tank. Engaging infantry threats without exposing themselves. Improved optics and situational awareness. Additional cameras and sensors providing 360-degree views around the tank. Anti-eye sniper. Anti-RPG systems. Some concepts included systems to detect and even engage sniper positions or RPG teams. Despite these challenges, tanks remained invaluable in urban operations, providing unparalleled firepower to breach obstacles, destroy strong points, and protect infantry. 5.4. The lessons from recent conflicts, coupled with rapid advancements in technology, are once again driving a profound evolution in tank design. Key areas of development for the next-generation main battle tank or future combat systems include lighter weight and hybrid propulsion. Current MBTs are incredibly heavy, limiting strategic deployability. Enhanced active protection systems, the ability to soft kill, modular, and adaptive protection. Armor will likely become even more modular, allowing tanks to quickly adapt their protection levels based on the threat environment, whether it's heavy anti-tank fire or persistent drone attacks. Man-in-man teaming. This is perhaps the most significant shift. Artificial intelligence and automation. AI will permeate every aspect of the tank, from optimizing maintenance schedules and diagnosing faults to enhancing target recognition, threat assessment, and decision support for the crew. Advanced sensing and situational awareness. Next-generation tanks will be covered in sensors, providing unparalleled 360-degree situational awareness, fusing data from various sources to create a comprehensive battlefield picture for the crew. New weaponry. While the 120mm, 125mm gun will likely remain, there's research into larger caliber guns for increased lethality, or even directed energy weapons for dazzling sensors or shooting down drones. Conclusion. The enduring relevance of the tank, from its humble, rhomboid origins on the muddy fields of the Somme, a clumsy answer to an unprecedented stalemate, the tank has undergone a relentless century of evolution. While some debate its future in an age of precision munitions, ubiquitous drones, and hypersonic weapons, the tank's core utility remains. The tank has adapted to every major shift in warfare, from the Blitzkrieg to desert duels, and from Cold War standoff to urban insurgencies.